This course examines the evolution of the trait approach and the importance of leaders understanding and applying their own unique leadership traits and strengths. Traits are the distinguishing personal characteristics of a leader, such as intelligence, honesty, self-confidence, or appearance. Nevertheless, trait approach researchers expanded their examination of personal attributes by using aptitude and psychological tests. These early studies looked at personality traits such as creativity and self-confidence, physical traits such as age and energy level, abilities such as knowledge and fluency of speech, social characteristics such as popularity and sociability, and work-related characteristics such as the desire to excel and persistence against obstacles. In recent years, there's been a resurgence of interest in examining leadership traits. Research has found a number of personal traits that distinguish leaders from non-leaders. Other studies have focused on followers' perceptions and indicate that certain traits are associated with people's perception of who is a leader. For example, one study found that the traits of intelligence, masculinity, and dominance were strongly related to how individuals perceived leaders. Others have found that a charismatic CEO is perceived to be more effective than other leaders, even though there's no evidence showing they actually are. Most importantly, there are a few traits that successful leaders need to develop. Let's take a look. Foundational to ethics, honesty refers to truthfulness. It implies an openness that followers welcome. Integrity means that a leader's character is whole, integrated, and grounded in solid ethical principles, and he or she acts in keeping with those principles. Finally, I want to conclude with traits around the idea of drive. Another characteristic considered essential for effective leadership is drive. Leaders are responsible for initiating a new project as well as guiding projects to successful completion. Drive refers to a high motivation that creates high effort levels by the leader. Leaders with drive seek advancement, have high energy and tenacity, and are often perceived as ambitious. If people don't strive to achieve something, they rarely do. Ambition can enable leaders to set challenging goals and to take initiative to reach them. A strong drive is also associated with high energy. Leaders work long hours over many years. They have stamina and are vigorous and full of life in order to handle the pace, the demands, and the challenges of leadership. As we've discussed, it's important for you to be able to identify your own traits that you can transform into strengths and bring to your leadership roles. In the late 1940s, most researchers began to shift away from the trait approach and started to look at leadership as an observable process or activity. Let's take a look at the behavioral approaches to leadership. The goal of the so-called behavioral approach was to determine what behaviors are associated with effective leadership. The researchers assumed that the behaviors of effective leaders differed somehow from the behaviors of less effective leaders, and the behaviors of effective leaders would be the same across all situations. The behavioral approach of the study of leadership included the Michigan studies, the Ohio State studies, and the leadership grid. The Michigan leadership studies were a program of research conducted at the University of Michigan. The goal of this work was to determine the pattern of leadership behaviors that result in effective group performance. The Ohio State leadership studies were conducted at about the same time as the Michigan studies in the late 1940s and early 1950s. During this program of research, behavioral scientists at The Ohio State University developed a questionnaire which they administered to both military and industrial settings to subordinates' perceptions of their leaders' behavior. The Ohio State studies identified several forms of leader behavior, but tended to focus on the two most common ones: consideration and initiating structure. Yet another behavioral approach of leadership is the leadership grid, originally called the managerial grid. The leadership grid provides a means for evaluating leadership styles and then training managers to move towards an ideal style of behavior. Job-centered leadership behavior is associated with directing and monitoring the performance of subordinates.
Technofunk presents the next tutorial on leadership basics. In this tutorial we will explain the concept of situational leadership. The theory of situational leadership was developed in the late 1960s by Paul Hersey and Ken Blanchard. The theory was first introduced as life cycle theory of leadership. During the mid-1970s, life cycle theory of leadership was renamed as situational leadership theory. Definition of situational leadership. Situational leadership is a style in which the leader or the manager must adjust his style to match the development level of the followers he is leading. The situational leadership model views leaders as varying their emphasis on task and relationship behaviors to best deal with different levels of follower maturity. According to Hersey and Blanchard, there are four main leadership styles. Telling or directing style, where leaders tell their people what and how to do. Selling or coaching, where leaders provide information and direction but with more participation with followers. Participating style, in which leaders focus more on the relationship and shares decision-making responsibilities. The last one is delegating, where leaders pass on most of the responsibilities onto the followers. The first style, according to situational leadership model, is telling or directing leadership style. This style is autocratic style, focused on high task and low relationship. Leader defines the roles of followers, and tells them what, when, where, and how to do different tasks. One-way communication flows from the leader to the followers. The second style under the situational leadership model is the selling or coaching leadership style. The leader behavior is high task or high relationship. Leaders provide information and direction, but there's more communication with followers. Leaders try to sell their message to the followers to make them understand what is important for the organization. The third style is the participating leadership style. This style is high relationship and low task focus. Leader focuses more on the relationship and people, and less on direction. The follower is empowered to make many of the decisions, since he has the knowledge to do so. There is high level of trust and communication between the leader and the follower. The fourth style is the delegating leadership style. It is considered as low relationship and low task leader behavior. Leader passes most of the responsibility onto the followers. The leaders still monitor progress, but they're less involved in decisions. The style involves letting followers run their own show.
According to the path goal theory, the leader's responsibility is to increase subordinates' motivation to attain personal and organizational goals. The path goal model is called the contingency theory because it consists of contingencies: leadership style, followers and situation, and the rewards to meet followers' needs. The path goal theory suggests a fourfold classification of leader behaviors. These classifications are the types of behavior the leader can adopt and include supportive, directive, achievement-oriented, and participative styles. Supportive leadership shows concern for subordinates' well-being and personal needs. Leadership behavior is open, friendly, and approachable, and the leader creates a team climate and treats subordinates as equals. Directive leadership tells subordinates exactly what they're supposed to do. Leader behavior includes planning, making schedules, setting performance goals and behavior standards, and stressing adherence to rules and regulations. Participative leadership consults with subordinates about decisions. The leader behavior includes asking for opinions and suggestions, encouraging participation in decision-making, and meeting with subordinates in their workplaces. Achievement-oriented leadership sets clear and challenging goals for subordinates. Leader behavior stresses high-quality performance and improvement over current performance. These 4 types of leader behaviors are not considered ingrained personality traits. Rather, they reflect types of behavior that every leader is able to adapt depending on the situation. And there are 2 important situational contingencies in the path-goal theory. The path-goal theory suggests 2 situational contingencies: the personal characteristics of the group members and the work environment. Personal characteristics of followers include such factors as ability, skills, needs, and motivations. For example, if an employee has a low level of ability or skill, the leader may need to provide additional training or coaching in order for the worker to improve performance. If a subordinate, on the other hand, is self-centered, the leader may need to use monetary rewards to motivate them. Subordinates who want or need clear direction and authority require a directive leader to tell them exactly what to do. The work environment contingencies include the degree of task structure, the nature of formal authority systems, and the work group itself. The task structure includes the extent to which tasks are defined and have explicit job descriptions or work procedures. The formal authority system includes the amount of legitimate power used by leaders and the extent to which policies and rules constrain employee behavior. At the end of the day, the path-goal theory can be complex. But using the model to specify precise relationships and make exact predictions about employee outcomes can be difficult. But the 4 types of leader behavior and the ideas for fitting them into situational contingencies provide a useful way for leaders to think about motivating subordinates.
Transactional leadership and transformational leadership are 2 theories that we can consider together. As the term implies, transactional leadership means that there's a reciprocity of behavior between the leader and the follower. People will follow based on the incentives in place. So the leader's job is to find the right mix of rewards and punishments, and then closely monitor what's going on. The theory of transformational leadership, by contrast, says that leaders gain buy-in and commitment not so much from the quid pro quo approach as they do from encouraging their followers, caring for them, inspiring them toward a vision. In short, they get results by proactively transforming the environment and the relationships, cultivating followership, rather than paying for it or punishing non-compliance like the transactional leader does.
Power. The sources that capture the different types of influences that connect leaders and their followers. The first power we will explore is legitimate power. This is one of the most popular and basic of the powers. This is how many are established as leaders. These leaders include presidents, managers, the chain of commands within the armed forces of countries, and several others. These leaders are usually appointed or elected towards their position, which usually also comes with a title. It is sometimes expected of them to call meetings, establish agendas, and coordinate tasks, but in several circumstances, they can appoint these tasks to other members of the group. A perfect example of this is the Armed Forces of the United States. There are nearly 30 ranks in each branch of the military, and in the military, most people acquire or gain much knowledge of leadership. No matter how high in rank you are, you will be following orders as often as giving them. This is one of the best examples, if not the best, of legitimate power. Next on the list is a source of a combination of powers. And what 2 other powers make as good a combination as reward and punishment. This power indicates that the leader can take or give things away, tangible and or intangible. These powers consist of appraisal, favoritism, undesirable assignments, taking privileges, and much more. A subpart of this power is what is known as coercion. This is something that should not be used at all, but sometimes is. Coercion is an extreme form of punishment involving threats of force to make members comply, which could lead to a rebellion among the group. For example, one of the most common forms of this type of leadership is often overlooked. Parenting. Children love to play, and usually have many sources of fun and or entertainment at their disposal. But privileges are not just given, they are earned. Let's say the children in the house do not complete their chores, and thus do not hold up their end of the bargain. In circumstances such as these, parents will usually resort to this power. All of the privileges these children were given are on the line to be taken away. This is sometimes accompanied by even more punishment, such as being grounded. They will also be required to do these chores, and maybe even more, while their privileges are taken away. Have you ever heard the famous quote, "Knowledge is power"? That quote relates to our next power, expert power. A person who has this source of power usually obtains information, knowledge, and/or other skills that are valuable to and can even influence the group. With this, they usually complete the critical tasks, so they are usually deemed essential to the group. This power does not guarantee that the member will be a leader of the group, but it is a stepping stone to legitimate power. For an example of this, we will look into the world of sports. The ideal leaders for most sports teams are owners and coaches, but there are others who influence the teams and even lead them. These people are usually titled team captains. They are most often the individuals with the most essential talent. You see it in almost every sport, backyard to professional, and in many places around the world, such as Bobby Clark, Peyton Manning, Michael Jordan, and many more. Some of these individuals even extend into the next source we will talk about. Another form of power is referent. With this power, an individual is generally well-respected, trusted, and/or admired. People try to copy the actions and behaviors of these types of leaders. This usually gives the leader tremendous power over people, as people usually seek their approval. Something that highly relates to this power is popularity, which leads to our example where this power is highly recognized, in schools. Most of the power usage depends on popularity, so the cool kid is usually the one to acquire it. They influence other students through the act of peer pressure. Whatever they do, their peers may be likely to follow, even if it is a bad decision. Lastly are two other powers that are not widely known, but are relevant. These powers are referred to as information and ecological. Information power, though it sort of relates to expert, is in its own category, to where the leader has access and controls to the distribution of information. This could also be the only source of information the group gets, which forms an increased dependency on this member. A bizarre but quite impactful example of this is the Coca-Cola formula. The formula of this product was so protected that the company left India in the 1970s because the government would require them to divulge the ingredients and subsequently their power. To this date, only 2 Coke executives know the formula to the iconic soda.